Yes, good morning. Of course, you can tell by the fact it's that time. I'm in my car. Of course, I'm eating my buttermint. It's basically 6 in the morning, so it's time for another drive along video as I do my morning commute to work. And again, we've done a lot of these now. I have to say, it's hard to come up with new ideas, so I thought I'd keep it really simple for today's one. Obviously, if you've seen these videos before, I think the journey's probably about 15 minutes if traffic's good. Let's hope traffic is good today because it is very early. And I want to see how long, I'm going to set myself a challenge today. I don't think I've done really a challenge on these before. How long can I talk about one fragrance for? So essentially for this whole journey today, I want to only talk about one fragrance essentially, and just see if it's actually possible. Because obviously when you do these videos you normally talk about more than one spray, because there's not normally 15 minutes to talk about with a fragrance. But I've picked a random one. I'm going to go Paco Rabanne 1 million, because let's be honest, there's probably quite a lot to talk about with Paco Rabanne 1 million. So we're going to start a sort of timer now. So I'm a few minutes into this video when I click record. So Paco Rabanne 1 million. Well, first of all, I'm going to start with a question for you. Have you ever owned Paco Rabanne 1 million? Or have you ever owned, a flanker of it, a clone of it? I'm sure you smelt it. I'm sure you smelt it in some capacity. And I'm going to tell you my experience first of all. So I first owned Paco Rabanne 1 million it would have been the end of 2018, Christmas Day. I just had an ankle operation the week before, and I wasn't allowed to move for 2 weeks. It was like basically sit on the sofa for 2 weeks, no weight bearing. And my auntie bought me it as part of I think it was part of a gift set, because it was a very small bottle. I think it was a 50ml bottle, it wasn't like 100ml. And I couldn't believe it. Of course, when I was starting to get into smellies at this time, from the reception job I was doing, it was always the one I wanted to try, because whenever you Google most popular men's fragrances, which is what I was Googling at the time, this one was always prominent. It was always at the very top of the list. And it was just everyone had Paco Rabanne 1 million. And I'll be honest, I wasn't actually sure what the smell was, because obviously at the time I hadn't had anything to say, oh yeah, that's what it is, because I'd never asked anyone or said anything. When I first smelled it, I was like, wow, this smells really good. And it's this lovely sort of cinnamon smell. And again, it's probably one of the real fragrances that put gourmand fragrances on the map essentially. It's a lovely sort of gold bar sort of bottle as well, which gave you that feeling of money, of course. And it almost had this, and I'm definitely not this, of course, but I'm quite sporty, but it's kind of chavvy vibe about it, where you just felt like it would go well with designer clothing. And that's why I wanted it. It was a night out sort of fragrance. I knew it was good for compliments, it was seductive. And of course, when you're 21 years old or whatever I was at the time, that's what I really wanted. I wanted that feeling. Now, I remember when I first wore it, this was after my operation, just at home, and I'll be honest, I didn't really get any reaction from it. And the first compliment I got on this fragrance, the Paco Rabanne 1 million, was actually when I was walking into work. I was outside, and there's this lady I always saw with 2 dogs. And I'll be honest with you, she never really said much to me, but one morning she did. And she said, oh, you always smell really nice. And she asked me, what do I have on that day? Because she could smell me down the road. And I said, oh, Paco Rabanne 1 million. And funny enough, she'd heard of that one. And she wanted to buy her grandson it. So that's kind of where I first got a compliment on it. But then going into it over the sort of few months, so again, only a 50ml bottle, my opinion on this one kind of changed. It kind of went from, it's nice, but also that Christmas my brother bought me Acqua di Parma Colonia Pura. So he treated me, he said, I've spent a bit more on you this Christmas because of your ankle operation. I just sort of wanted to get you something better. And I remember Christmas Day, we actually went for a curry. Was it New Year's Day? I think it was Christmas Day. I think it was the same day. And I felt like I had to wear it, because obviously My auntie wasn't there, my brother was there. I knew my brother had spent a lot, so I wore a nice sort of pretty green check sort of shirt for that curry. I'll be honest with you as well, the curry house was super busy. Curry on Christmas Day, I didn't realise was such a thing. So I wore that one anyway, went down in my crutches. They were so accommodating, the staff there. They got me a chair to put my foot up on and all these things. But it was then, after I wore that fragrance, I thought, yeah, this one smells nicer. And I knew it was more expensive than 1 million. I didn't realise how expensive some fragrances were though, because obviously if you're not someone who's into fragrances, or I was into them but not like I was now, you probably don't realise actually how much certain sprays are. I thought 1 million, like 60-70 quid was like the gold standard of fragrances. I thought that was like a high-end price. It's only when you start to look a little bit further you realise it's not. So with that in mind, I'm like, I do like 1 million, but it's not as nice as this, and it's not as nice as some of the other ones I've owned this year, you know. Even I was thinking, actually, 20-30ml bottle down, it's not as strong as I thought it was going to be, you know. So again, I'm kind of wearing it, but not necessarily loving it as much as some of the other ones I've got. I'm kind of wearing it more because I think other people like it, and I know that's the thing that everyone wears. A little bit like Sauvage today, Dior Sauvage. It feels like a lot of people wear it because that's what they know people like, and they're not really necessarily into fragrances the same way. They just want something that makes them smell good, and they know this one's mass pleasing. And I think the other thing I was starting to find was when I was getting some fragrances, some cheapies, and I always wanted some cheapies, they all smelled like 1 million. And I'm not saying they were as good quality or as smooth or as well rounded, but I thought, if I want to buy this fragrance alone, I can get this clone or this cheap fragrance that just smells exactly the same. And I can remember some of the ones that did. I had one called L'Oreal, I think it was L'Oreal H, it was called, and that was just a very cheap, it was on Fragrance Direct, like £3 or £4. There was one called Callum Best Gold, which I believe Callum Best is George Best, the footballer's son. This one was a lot stronger. This is when I was just literally only shopping on Fragrance Direct. And there's been others. I mean, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head which. There's definitely another one I had. That's a strong 1 million clone. I've got one at the moment from Marks and Spencer's called Spiced Amber. That's definitely a clone of 1 million. Again, amber's super prominent in this, which is an accord of multiple sort of sweet gourmandy notes. So all things considered, I'm like, I don't really need 1 million, and I'll be honest, ever since then I've not bought it. I've never bought Paco Rabanne 1 million as the original. Now there are some flanks of this though that I do think were very good, and I believe the one that I really liked was called Privé. And the bottle was kind of like a brown sort of bottle, still obviously the golden bar sort of design, but it was very nice. I really liked it, and I so regret, I think there was a price they were selling it for like £38 for 100ml on a website, and I thought, and the reason I didn't buy it, and to be fair, it was good of me not to, was I thought I've got a lot of fragrances in me, I'm going to restrict myself, because I was just buying fragrances for the sake of it. I just wanted to try everything and anything. But yeah, I do think some of the flankers potentially are now better than the original. I think there's a 1 million Parfum. There's, off the top of my head, there might be a 1 million Elixir as well. So yeah, there's plenty out there that I think are very good flanks as this, and I do think that's probably the thing I'd say with this one. It definitely feels like it's moved away from that kind of fragrance now. Again, Dior Sauvage does feel like it's now the 1 million of its generation, let's say. but it's, you know, it's still around. You still smell the odd person wearing it, that's for sure. I mean, even when I go to the gym, it's, if you had to sort of say the percentage of people that have all the ones you smell in there, I'd say it's about 75% Dior Sauvage, 15 to 20% just a generic body spray, and then maybe that 5-10% you get that smell of Paco Rabanne 1 million. But I do think it's one of those scents that is for a younger person. I couldn't imagine, I mean, even myself now coming into my 30s, it doesn't feel like a fragrance that a man wears. It feels like a one that a teenager wears. It's definitely more suited to the winter time, and I think that's probably one thing that has gone against it as much as anything. It's not as versatile. You know, it lacks the versatility of, you know, a blue fragrance like Bleu de Chanel, Dior Sauvage, Dylan Blue by Versace. And again, when you're living in a cost of living crisis, whatever you want to say, everything's going up in price, you don't really want to be spending more money to buy 2 fragrances, let's say. And you find with those winter fragrances like Paco Rabanne 1 million, while you can love them, and I'd probably say I do prefer my sweeter winter fragrances to the summer ones, you can also go off them a lot quicker. And I wonder if that's kind of what's been happening with this one. It's been more suited to those clubbing nights out. People think, I don't really want that smell anymore. I want one I can wear to the gym as well. And yeah, you just move away from it. And you don't see as many clones. But look, the clones out of it are still there very much. But I'll be honest, when I've gone on clone websites for, you know, fragrances, the ones at the top never tend to be clones of Paco Rabanne 1 million. It tends to be more clones of things like, what's this bus doing? So it's nice of the bus not to put its signal on. What a stupid bus. So yeah, it tends to be Dior Sauvage that's like your top seller, or even if you go on the Essence Vault, their top one on there is Tom Ford Lost Cherry, Tobacco Vanille. Because again, while this isn't a cheapy fragrance, Paco Rabanne 1 million, it's not really expensive at the same time. You know, it's not like a Creed Aventus, which is a real expensive one. So people tend to lean towards going, well, I'm going to get one that smells like a £300 fragrance rather than Paco Rabanne 1 million that's like a £60-70 fragrance. So, you know, all things considered, I think that's probably gone against it as well. That clone industry has kind of gone against it a little bit. But do I still think it's a good fragrance? Do I still think it's one where you go, it's still got its place? 100%. You know, I said for me growing up, that was the in fragrance. And ultimately, still, we know sweeter fragrances are still the in thing. Does everyone want this sort of fragrance now? Maybe not. It's not as vanillic maybe as some of the others, but it's still good. You know, it's still good. It's still got a very popular DNA, and I just think where it's been copied so much and where people are looking for more versatility, that's probably why it's fallen down a bit. But I'm pretty certain, I'd be very interested actually to know what the best sellers have been maybe in the last certainly 3 years. You know, would it still be in the top 5, top 10? You know, but yeah, I know I can look at some fragrances now, like Aramis is probably a good example. I can't think of many times I smell people wearing Aramis, but I don't see that one ever going. You know, it's been around for so long. Like Habit Rouge, for example, the other one, I absolutely love it. But there's no two ways about it. This is more for your fragrance connoisseur, let's say, than your average person. Whereas I still think 1 million, maybe it's not loved by the fragrance community so much, but it's also loved by it's still loved by your average person that's maybe getting into fragrances. But yeah, I'm interested to know how many times have you owned this one. If you're watching this, I've managed to still go on. I'm 13 minutes in, and yeah, just your general thoughts on, is it one that you would buy again? I never look for it. And I think the other thing, of course, with a lot of fragrances is there's new releases just all the time. You know, you can't go anywhere now without a new fragrance release, adverts. I mean, even where I live locally, there's these billboards at times. I remember in London, actually, not too long ago, there was a new Moschino Toy Boy, and that one did, you know, that one was on in Piccadilly on like all the billboards. So, and I don't feel Toy Boy was necessarily the most popular fragrance in the world, but there is this element, and I think this is the same for 1 million, and I think Dior Sauvage is going this way. People love to hate it, but actually deep down, they're not always the, you know, even if you are that person who generally doesn't like 1 million, I think you've also got to respect it. It's not just about you, other people do. And I think that's what I've really found with this fragrance. It's one that people, particularly online, don't like this one. You know, they say it's basically, you know, it's everything that's wrong with the fragrance world, but the sales must be backing up the fact it still goes around, and I think it just intrigues people at the same time. But yeah, it's a good scent. As I said, I've got a clone of it at the minute, and do I think I'll ever buy it as a clone or as a fragrance again? Probably, but I'm one of them that probably needs also a year or two away from it, just so I don't absolutely hate it and never want it again, because I don't want that to be the case. I want it to be one that I do think, do you know what, I'll get that again at some point and I'll treat myself, but it won't be on my 30th birthday list this year, that is for sure. But there we go. So can you talk about a fragrance for 30 or, well, not 30 minutes, 15 minutes? You can, but I don't know how boring that one was for you. I feel like I could go on for another 20. It wasn't as difficult a challenge as I thought that, but yeah, I've enjoyed this one today. Weather's looking nice. Let's hope it's a nice quiet shift and not too difficult this week. But yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you later.